Shri Vallabhadi Shri Jai, Jai Shri Radhe Ji. Day 197 of the stories of the 252 Vaishnav disciples of Sri Mataji, beginning today with Varta 184, the story of a renunciate Brahmin from Govardhan who, while circumambulating Sri Giriraj mountain, met two Vaishnavas and brought them home to feed them. Jai Shri Radhe Ji, Jai Shri Krishna. Bhav Prakash. This is a devotee of Sattvic disposition. In the eternal Leela, his name is Maya, who manifests from Ranga and is thus a manifestation of her divine loving sentiment. He was born to a Sanadya Brahmin in Govardhan. He was renunciate from his early childhood. His parents realized that he must have been a renunciate from his previous birth, therefore they were not affectionate towards him. They died when he was 17, and he came to Gopalpur, Jetipura, became Sri Gosaiji's disciple and remained living there. Part 1. This Brahmin renunciate would circumambulate Sri Giriraj every day. Then he would go to beg for his food supplies. There was another Vaishnava who came to Gokul. He was a householder and he wanted to just be able to earn his living there. However, he had resolved to never take anything from Sri Vallabhacharyaji's home or lineage. He came to Sri Giriraji thinking that he would make his living there. However, every establishment and everyone there was related in some way to Sri Acharyaji, and so he could not support himself in that way at all. He left everything and sat down to simply meditate and worship the Lord in his heart. Bhav Prakash. The teaching here is that it is forbidden for a Vaishnava to ever take anything from the temple or from the Guru. Part 1 continued. He stayed sitting in a single position day and night. When the renunciate Brahmin went out on his parikrama, he saw the Vaishnava sitting there for 5 days continuously. He wondered where that Vaishnava would be getting his prasad. He addressed him, "Come on over to my house. You can sit there and worship the Lord and also partake of Mahaprasad." He led the Vaishnava to his own room. He prepared the supplies he had received from begging, offered them to the Lord and gave the prasadi plate to the Vaishnava. When he had partaken, the Brahmin also ate. Many days passed in this manner. A third Vaishnava came to sit in that very place to worship the Lord. The renunciate Brahmin asked of him, "Do you want to stay with us in this house?" He agreed, and then the Brahmin also fed him Mahaprasad. The Brahmin continued to beg for supplies and do the cooking. It was a lot of effort for him. Seeing this, Sri Thakurji addressed him, "You go and fetch the supplies, and I shall do all the other tasks." The two Vaishnavas heard this conversation and wondered who the Brahmin was speaking to. When they looked closely, they saw that it was Sri Thakurji. They supplicated, "O Maharaj, please give us permission to all work together." Sri Thakurji said to the first, "Do you do the cooking?" To the second he instructed, "You complete all the other tasks in the house. The Brahmin will fetch the supplies through begging. The three of you must share the workload," and they began to do so. Bhav Prakash. The moral of this story is that you find a Vaishnava who is hungry and thirsty with no way of providing for themselves, then you should bring them home and feed them. This is the least that a Vaishnava should do within his spiritual duties. Here the Lord also said that the Vaishnavas who had come to partake of prasad should also help with the household chores. Why? The Lord's nature is very tender. If he sees that anyone is making excess effort to serve him, then he gets very upset. If those who eat also share in the burden of the household chores, then none of them become overwhelmed. Sri Thakurji is exceptionally kind to his devotees. How? He remains indebted to anyone who serves him with no expectation of reward. That is why, in this instance, he even offered to join with such tasks. For a Vaishnava, the Lord's Seva is the highest duty. Thus concludes Varta 184, the story of the renunciate Brahmin and the two Vaishnavas, all three of whom were recipients of Sri Gosaiji's grace and accomplished Vaishnavas. There is no end to their tale. Continuing with Varta 185, the story of a king from the east who asked about the duties of householders and renunciates. Bhav Prakash. This is a devotee of Rajasi disposition. In the eternal Leela, his name is Sanshayashil, who manifests from Ranga and is thus a personification of her divine loving sentiment. He was born as a prince in a kingdom in the east. He was 18 when his father died and he became king. After some time he set out for Jagannath Puri in order to have the holy site of Sri Jagannath Raji. At that very same time Sri Gosaiji was residing in Sri Jagannath Puri. The king saw him and realized that he was a divine being. The king bowed low to him and supplicated, "O Maharaj, please bless me by accepting me as your disciple." Sri Gosaiji took him into his shelter. Many of the king's family members also became Sri Gosaiji's disciples at the same time. The king asked, "Where do my duties now lie?" Sri Gosaiji instructed him to serve the Lord, and he granted the king one swarupa for seva. He said, "Serve the Lord very lovingly. Associate with all Vaishnavas who come to you." The king took Sri Thakurji back with him to his kingdom. Part 1. The king made his seva to Sri Thakurji very lovingly. and fed Mahaprasad to each and every Vaishnava who came there. He would invite them to sit comfortably and honoured them in various ways. He would let them stay for 2 weeks or a month, and when it was time for them to leave, he would inquire of them, which position of life is the more elevated, that of a renunciate or that of the householder? Even after asking this of many, he still retained a doubt in his mind as to the answer. That's why his name was Sansheshila. He could not come to a decision. He asked many Vaishnavas and heard many replies, but to no avail. One day, Adbhut Dasji passed by the king's home as he wandered around. The king welcomed him warmly and fed him Mahaprasad. When he was about to set off, the king said, "Please stay some more days here." Adbhut Das replied that he never stayed a single night in anyone's house. The king asked, "Oh, listen, please, to my inquiry. Please set off only after answering it." Adbhut Das agreed and wanted to know what this was. The king piped up, "I have asked many Vaishnavas whether the life of a renunciate is more exalted or that of a householder. I have heard many opinions, but I am not yet convinced. Please be kind enough to remove my doubts." Adbhut Das asked him, "Would you like me to tell you or show you?" The king replied that he would like to have the practical demonstration. Adbhut Das replied, "Do what I tell you to, and I will show you." The king agreed. Adbhut Das instructed, "Go to your stables and select a good horse. Ride by yourself. When you come to any village, enter it." The king did so. As evening fell, he stopped under a tree, tied his horse to it, and sat down. In that tree there was a hole where there was a bird's nest. In that nest live a bird couple and their 2 chicks. The male bird flew into the forest, and when it flew back, he was each carrying 4 pieces of fruit. He shared them out amongst the 4 of them. The bird then caught sight of the king sitting under the tree and said, "Today we have a guest. I will give him my share." The female bird also said she would give her piece of fruit to the king, their guest, and she did. After this, the 2 chicks also gave their king their pieces of fruit. The 4 of them gave him all 4 of their pieces of fruit, and the king felt very happy. He stayed there the night. He set off again on his horse the next morning. He came to a village and entered it. There many kings had gathered together. This king also went and sat down. The kings had gathered there because the king of this particular place had a daughter who was to be married. The king had prepared a vat of boiling oil and dropped a ring into it. He declared that he would give his daughter's hand in marriage to the one who could get the ring out of the vat. At that moment, Adbhut Das arrived there. He immersed his whole body in the vat of oil and sat there pouring that boiling oil over his head with his gourd pot. When he had finished his bath, he got out of the vat. The king of that village bowed low to him and spoke with his hands joined in respect. He praised him, saying, "Oh, you are truly great. I wish to give you my daughter's hand in marriage." Adbhut Das asked, "Do you wish to give her to me?" The king reaffirmed his decision. Adbhut Das pointed out the king whom he had told to come to that village and instructed the bride's father to give her to this king instead. Saying this, Adbhut Das left and went to the forest. The king married the princess and returned home. On returning, he re-entered his Sri Thakurji's Seva. When Vaishnavas came there, he fed them Mahaprasad and then began again to ask them whether the life of a renunciate was elevated or that of a householder. He heard many different answers but was still in doubt. One day, Adbhut Das revisited him. The king fed him with Mahaprasad. After honouring him, he again supplicated, "O Maharaj, please now tell me which position in life is more elevated." Adbhut Das spoke out, "O king, have you already forgotten how one Vaishnava came to you and relayed the answers to you?" The king admitted that he had indeed forgotten. Adbhut Das continued, "You rode out on your horse and sat under one tree, and that tree were 4 birds who each had 1 piece of fruit, and they gave all 4 pieces to you. They remained hungry themselves. This is an example of the duties and life of a householder. Then you rode on to a village where many kings had gathered. They had heated up a vat of oil in which there was a ring, and none of them was capable of taking the ring out of the oil. Then one renunciate came there and sat inside the vat of oil and then bathed himself with the hot oil, using his gourd pot. He came out of the vat holding the ring. The king gave his daughter's hand in marriage to that renunciate, and he gave her to you to marry. Look, O king, these are life and duties of a renunciate. You now have the answers." The king heard everything and then piped up, "O Maharaj, I see that both paths are fraught with difficulty." Adbhut Das said, "O king, you have much wealth and many possessions. You also have a good income, and you use that to honour many Vaishnavas. Therefore, why do ask this same question over and over again? Stop asking the Vaishnavas this question." The king agreed not to ask it again. Adbhut Das left for Vraja. The king never asked that question of any Vaishnava again. The king immersed himself in the loving seva of his Sri Thakurji. Bhav Prakash. This story teaches that kind and generous charity to others is the best of all virtues. No other dharma can equal it. One should perform one's duties whilst harbouring no doubt at all in one's heart. Thus concludes Varta 185, the story of the king from the east, who received Sri Gosaiji's grace and was an accomplished Vaishnava. There is no end to his tale. Thus concludes our reading for today. Sub Vaishnav Uncle Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Radhe.